that came out after 9/11, that many of the hijackers received US military training at installations in the United States, which required a certain degree of security clearance. The reports came from Newsweek, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. 5 of the alleged hijackers, for example, it's been alleged, received training in the 1990s at secure US military installations. These included, according to Night Ridder News Service, Mohammed Atta had trained at the International Officer School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. Abdulaziz Al-Omari had attended Aerospace Medical School at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas. Saeed Al-Ghamdi had been to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. And there are others, apparently 4 of them trained at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. And there are many other reports of this nature. Now, when this actually came out in the press, obviously there was a big kind of hullabaloo. How did this happen? And Senator Bill Nelson actually faxed the Office of the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, and he demanded to know, is this true? And September 17th was when he made contact, and he asked the Pentagon, can you confirm or refute these reports? Now, by September the 21st, Senator Nelson was informed that the FBI could neither say yes or no, according to his press office. Apparently, the Bureau was still investigating any connection to the military facility. Now, a pioneering journalist by the name of Daniel Hopsicker, he's a former producer at PBS Wall Street Week, and former investigative reporter for NBC News, he contacted Senator Nelson's office a month later, and he wanted to know, excuse me, precisely what was going on. And they said that the FBI had said that they are trying to get through something complicated and difficult. And this was several months after this happened. Now, Hopsicker wasn't satisfied with this, and in the end, he spoke to somebody at the Department of Defense and really pushed them. And in the end, the spokesman admitted, I do not have the authority to tell you who attended which schools. It's a very significant statement because it confirmed that somebody did attend schools, but we just don't have the authority to tell you. And again, this is an issue that the 9/11 Commission simply has not looked into. To give you one more thing, I mean, the other issue I wanted to discuss, but I won't be able to discuss in any detail here, is the extent of the surveillance of almost every one of the hijackers by the intelligence community. I mean, the evidence on the public record, I discussed this in my book, The War on Truth, it shows that every single hijacker was, for at least a year to more than a year, under the surveillance of the US intelligence community and often many other intelligence agencies. And despite that, despite some of them being known to the intelligence community, they were still able to come into the United States. I will only give the example of Mohammed Atta. We have confirmation that Mohammed Atta was on a terrorist watch list since 1986. He had been implicated in a bus bombing in Israel. And now this is very strange. If he was on a terrorist watch list since 1986, it should have been, I mean, he was able to come in and out of the United States. I mean, his visa in particular was, had expired. Before he came in in January 2001 for re-entry. He was in violation of his visa status. Somehow he was allowed in. And why wasn't the screens flashing that this guy is a confirmed suspected terrorist? And I guess I will close. I don't want to go into too many details and take too much time. I will close just to give you an example. Is the conventional narrative tells us that Mohammed Atta was not extensively surveyed once he had entered into the United States. I found an interesting report from the Miami Herald quoting officials from the National Security Agency confirming that essentially conversations between Mohammed Atta, who was obviously the chief 9/11 hijacker, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was, he's been described as the kind of 9/11 mastermind. Their conversations between them occurred, and these were monitored by the National Security Agency while Mohammed Atta was in the United States. And the most interesting is here is that, I mean, the Herald points out that the NSA is prohibited by law from monitoring calls to and from the United States without special court orders. So this was approved. And yet this is something that has been denied, it hasn't been looked into. And the worrying thing, I have a report from the London Independent, officials say that Mr. Mohammed, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was in Pakistan at the time, received a telephone call from Mohammed Assad, the hijackers' ringleader, on 10th September. Intelligence officials who monitored and then translated that conversation believed that using coded language, Mr. Mohammed gave Mr. Atta the final approval to launch the strikes. And the question, of course, needs to be asked is that what else remains of these conversations that were intercepted, how much information was available, and why was this not acted on and circulated in the intelligence community appropriately, and why hasn't the Commission, first and foremost, dealt with this issue? In conclusion, I will summarize this kind of brief presentation.
Extremely briefly, like
very
in
briefly.
2
9/11 hijackers
seconds.
that were clearly not Islamic extremists. It's difficult to see how this fact fits with the conventional assumption that they were devout members of Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. Furthermore, and alternatively, it's difficult to see how, even if they were members of Al-Qaeda, how the conventional depiction of Al-Qaeda as a network of devout militant Islamic extremists can be maintained given this distinctively un-Islamic conduct. The question then arises, as to who these people were, and alternatively, what was the nature of this apparent Al-Qaeda cell? The official narrative as it stands cannot resolve this problem. It's exacerbated in light of the fact that the majority of the 9/11 hijackers repeatedly entered and re-entered the United States on fraudulent visas, apparently supplied by the US consulate in Jeddah, which reportedly has a CIA connection. Worse still, many of these hijackers, while in the United States, somehow managed to obtain high-level security clearance to train at several US military installations. They had simultaneous connections with the US military while they were connected to Al-Qaeda, and I will leave it at that. This is a fundamental anomaly. It strikes at the core of the official narrative. I don't know what the explanation is, I won't pretend to, but we need to have some kind of investigation to resolve this.